Hi, I'm John Woodman, Springfield computer guy in Springfield, Missouri, and currently your computer detective. Today we're going to take on the mystery of the strange layers in Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate, posted on the White House website on April 27, 2011. And we're going to bust the layers part of this mystery wide open. This is part 2 in a series of videos using computer technology and problem-solving logic to investigate the Obama long-form birth certificate. If you haven't seen part 1, I recommend that you go back and watch that video, as it gives some important background information on our investigation. Here's the detective process we're going to use. First, we're going to observe the clues. Then, we'll list the possible theories that might explain those clues. Then, we'll test the theories to see which theory or theories fit the facts. Now, here's the basic idea that we're testing. Our hypothesis that the layers in Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate and related clues prove that the long-form birth certificate is a fraud. By the way, some of the best-known players in this particular debate have reputations for being definitely biased, either for or against Mr. Obama's eligibility. I'm not going to claim to be completely unbiased for the simple reason that I don't really think there is such a thing. All of us bring our own personal biases and prejudices into any controversial issue. I will say, though, that I am committing to give the best and fairest opinion that I can, and, very importantly, my goal is to not start out committed to any particular outcome. So why am I consciously trying not to be committed to a particular outcome? Because we stand a poor chance of arriving at the truth if we let ourselves be committed either to innocent or guilty before we even get started. If we want to know the truth, then we need to be prepared to find either way. For that reason, finding yes on some things and no on other things is perfectly acceptable. There are basically 3 possible overall outcomes that we might come to. We might find strong proof of a fraud. We might find that there's enough evidence of fraud to justify real doubt, but not enough to completely comprehensively prove fraud. Or we might find that we really don't see enough credible evidence to support the claim. Now, I want you to understand the seriousness of what we're talking about here. Whatever we find out, it's got consequences. If we find really strong, conclusive proof of fraud, then it'll be time to start calling your congressman, because at that point we're looking at possibilities of impeachment, removal from office, maybe more lawsuits than the 75 or so lawsuits already filed, and very likely some criminal indictments as well. On the other hand, if we find significant but not conclusive evidence of fraud, then there could be a big eligibility cloud of doubt hanging over our next election. If we find no credible evidence of the claim, then that would be an indication that the birther movement would either need to find strong evidence of forgery or lack of eligibility someplace else, or shift to opposing Barack Obama on policy matters rather than on his birth certificate. By the time that we're done, I can guarantee that we will come to one of these 3 conclusions. So, let's get started. Here's what we have to account for. First of all, we have to account for the existence of these mysterious layers. We also need to account for the white halo that seems to be around everything in the document. In fact, when you make the words go away, that white halo becomes not a white halo, but a white shadow. So we need to account for the white shadow behind the text layers as well, or the text image layers, because they're not true text layers, they're an image of text. We also need to account for the fact that the background layer is not just a single consistent background. It's got a lot of actual information in it. And if you watch the last video, you saw how in a normal situation the background layer wouldn't have all of this information. It would be a simple background. We also have a number of other clues as well that we'll need to account for. So how do we start to get a handle on proving or disproving our hypothesis? Well, the best way to get someplace is for us to ask the right question. So, what's the key question? Here it is. Where did the layers come from? If we can answer that question, we'll be well on our way to solving this mystery. Here are the two immediate theories that come to mind. First, that the layers were created by a human being in order to edit the document. Or secondly, that the layers were created by a machine in order to do optical character recognition, what's called OCR. Now, if you're not familiar with optical character recognition, it's a process used by computer software to look at a text image and then try and translate that text image into actual computer characters, like the type that you would type on the computer. So you're going from image to actual characters. But we can strike that second theory immediately, for one very simple reason. There's no recognized text in the document at all. And in fact, if you run it through OCR, optical character recognition, Adobe Illustrator will tell you that OCR has never been run on that document, as far as it can tell. So we can immediately get rid of the OCR theory. There is, however, one more possibility in here, which is that the layers were created by a machine, but not to do optical character recognition. Instead, they were created either in order to optimize the image or to allow for possible later editing by a human being, or both. Let's have a look at these layers. First, let's think about the layers themselves. Why are they there? If you're a human being, the theory is that the layers are there in order to allow you to edit things in the document. But if you're a forger, how much sense does it actually make to have these layers and to keep these layers in the document that's published? Doesn't it make a whole lot more sense to flatten the file and publish a flat file out on the web? In fact, some of the people who have put videos on YouTube stating that the document is a forgery because it has layers have also stated in their video, "I can't believe the forger was this stupid. It's not even a good forgery." So if the layers were created by a human being, it would seem that we would require either a stupid forger or a forger who simply got so careless that he forgot to remove the layers. Well, that's not really what you would expect. It's not really what I would expect from a forger for the President of the United States. What if these layers were created by a machine? Well, we actually have a theory as to why that might be the case. In order to optimize the image, or in order to make the image editable by a human being. But if someone wanted to write software that would make the image editable by separating things out into layers, the software doesn't work very well, does it? Because it hasn't really separated things very cleanly into layers. So I think here the better theory would be that perhaps it was separated into layers in order to do some sort of optimization, in order to cut down on the file size, which is then possibly going to be downloaded by people. And this is something that people such as myself who do graphics and files for the web actually do. It's a very common process to try and optimize an image to cut down on the file size so that there's not as much traffic for people having to download it. Now, most of the time it's not done this way. Most of the time it's done by creating an optimized JPG file. But still, it's a possibility, and we'll look at this possibility a little bit deeper later on. We have the halo around the elements. If you're a human being, why would we have this halo around the elements? The only thing that I can think of is that we would have the halo around the elements for the same reason that we have a white shadow behind the elements. That the halo and the white shadow are all the same thing. The problem with this is this would have to be quite deliberately created. You don't accidentally get a white shadow behind something. It is possible for a graphic designer to create a shadow, white or any other color, but it has to be done very deliberately. This does not look like something that was done very deliberately, first of all, because it's a total mess. Secondly, what's the reason for it? What's the reason for a white shadow? The only reason I can think of would be to make it look like a computer program had done it. But if someone wanted to do that, they would have also had to have separated out every one of these lines, every one of these little elements, every single one of these letters would have had to have been cut out separately. Isn't it a lot simpler to think, I mean, why would any forger do this? All it does is create suspicion. So once again, we're back to the fact that this also makes no sense at all. What if it were a program that did it? What if it were a machine that did it? What if software tried to separate out layers? The thing about software is that software doesn't always do a perfect job. You might well have a software program that would separate out some things and not others. But more importantly, in terms of the halo, if you have a letter on a document, when you scan that letter in, you will have not completely black pixels like we see in most of these letters, but you will have pixels that are varying shades of gray. If you have a program that tries to separate that out into black, basically, and white, then you've only got one choice. You've either got to make the pixels black or you've got to make them white. Well, that would explain white pixels around the letters. Any pixels that were a bit grayscaled but not dark enough to make completely black would be made white. What about the white shadow behind it? That also makes sense if you're talking about a machine, because a machine would not know what the background behind it would be and would tend to possibly guess at it, possibly make kind of a white background behind it.